Hey guys, tonight's story starts with a chill breeze, a sky painted in smoke and dawn, and the slow, creeping truth that you've fallen out of your own century. There are no roads, no fences, just endless wilderness breathing in rhythm with you. Somewhere in the distance, a campfire crackles, voices murmur in a language you've never heard, and a wolf howls like it's announcing you to the world. This isn't survival. Not yet. It's arrival. And history is waiting to see what you'll do next. But before you get too cozy, take a second to gently tap that new hype button YouTube just added. It really does help little guys like me push through the algorithm. And be sure to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy this strange little corner of quiet storytelling. Drop a comment with where you're listening from and what time it is for you. It's strangely comforting to know who else is drifting off with us around the world. Now, get comfortable. Let the day melt away, and we'll drift back together into the quiet corners of the past. You wake up with the distinct impression that the earth has opinions about you. The moss beneath your cheek is damp and oddly smug, and the trees overhead lean inward like a crowd that's just been told a secret at your expense. Light filters through the canopy in shy fragments, strips of gold tangled with dust and leaves, and somewhere nearby a bird laughs in a tone that doesn't feel friendly. You sit up too fast and immediately discover gravity still works, which feels both comforting and rude. Your clothes are soaked in dew, your shoes, whatever's left of them, look like they lost a fight with a raccoon, and your first breath tastes like wood smoke and panic. There's a sound, a low rhythmic hum, like the forest itself is breathing. You listen for traffic, for engines, for anything human, and find only the argument of cicadas. You call out, "Hello?" which the trees consider, then answer with a falling branch. It misses by a polite distance. You take that as a no. Standing is a negotiation. Your legs are made of half sleep and protest, but they cooperate eventually. Every direction looks the same, endless green stitched together with fog. The air smells thick, sweet, ancient, like it remembers what you did last century. You pat your pockets, find nothing but lint and misplaced optimism. No phone, no wallet, not even a crumb of civilization. Just you, a shirt that might once have been blue, and a pair of damp socks plotting your demise. You pick a direction at random, because indecision won't get you fed. The ground squelches beneath your feet like it's laughing quietly, and each step sends up the scent of wet earth and decaying leaves. Somewhere in the distance, a woodpecker starts drilling with the enthusiasm of a drunk percussionist. The sound echoes through the forest, joined by the whisper of wind and the creak of branches. It's not silent here, but it's the kind of noise that reminds you you're very small and very edible. You pass a fallen tree coated in mushrooms that look suspiciously like bread rolls left out too long. A beetle the size of your thumb crawls across your hand, and for a brief moment you consider naming it, then decide you're not emotionally ready for that kind of attachment. The sun is climbing higher now, spilling light through gaps in the trees, and for the first time, you see how impossibly green everything is. Not the neat park kind of green, but the wild, feral sort that looks like it would bite if you touched it wrong. Your stomach growls, a sound so loud it startles a nearby squirrel into dropping its lunch. You eye the nut it leaves behind, but decide dignity, thin as it is, still matters. A patch of ferns brushes your legs as you walk, soft and damp and strangely warm, like the forest is taking inventory. Every step feels watched. Every breath feels borrowed. You find a stream, narrow and fast, curling through the trees with silver laughter. You kneel beside it, dip your hands into the water, and it bites back with cold so sharp it shocks your bones awake. The reflection that stares back at you doesn't look entirely like you remember. Hair matted, eyes too wide, skin painted in dirt and confusion. You drink anyway, because the alternative is thirst, and you've already made enough poor life choices for one morning. The water is clean, pure, and tastes faintly of something you can't name, like time before soap existed. Something moves across the water, just a ripple at first, then a shadow gliding beneath the surface. You freeze, heart thudding. The shape vanishes. A fish, you tell yourself. Hopefully a fish, possibly not a fish. Either way, you decide not to put your hands back in. You follow the stream for a while, because moving feels safer than thinking. Birds call from somewhere high above, their songs strange, layered, complicated. One of them sounds like it's mocking you. You imagine it perched up there, telling its friends about the weird human who can't tell north from nonsense. You stumble on a root, nearly faceplant into a patch of ferns, and mutter something that would make the bird blush if it spoke English. When you finally stop, the forest sighs. That's the only way to describe it. A long, low exhale, like it's acknowledging your presence at last. The air cools slightly, and the light shifts to gold again. You don't know if that means it's morning or evening, or if the trees simply decided you've had enough for one day. You sit on a mossy rock, listening to the slow pulse of life all around you, the rustle, the hiss, the hum, and realize how utterly, profoundly far from everything you've ever known you are. For a moment, there's peace. A strange, quiet kind of peace that settles somewhere behind your ribs. You could almost believe the forest approves of you now, or at least tolerates you. Then something howls in the distance, long, low, and close enough to make your heartbeat trip over itself. The peace collapses immediately. You stand, glance in every direction again, and pick the one that looks least likely to eat you. The forest watches, amused. The trees whisper to each other in creaks and sighs. Somewhere, another branch falls. It misses again, but closer this time. You decide to take the hint. The sound of rushing water finds you before you find it. It's not the polite babble of a park stream or the decorative trickle of a backyard fountain. This is a full-throated, ancient roar, the kind of water that sounds like it's been making decisions long before you existed. You push through the undergrowth, branches slapping your face with leafy disapproval. And there it is, a river so wide and alive it looks like it's moving with purpose. Mist hangs over it in thin ghosts, and sunlight flickers across its surface like the world's most dangerous invitation. You crouch by the bank, already half in love with it, and then, because balance is an illusion, you slip. One boot gives out. Your center of gravity stages a coup, and you fall straight into the river with the grace of a brick. The water greets you instantly and aggressively. It's shockingly cold, biting through fabric and skin, and it doesn't flow around you so much as through you. You flail, kick, gasp, and manage to swallow a mouthful that tastes of stone, ice, and consequences. The current drags you a few feet before deciding you're not worth the effort and spits you onto a gravel bar like a poorly reviewed meal. You lie there for a moment, coughing, soaked, and contemplating your life choices. The river churns beside you, utterly unimpressed. You could swear it sighs. A fish surfaces, large and golden, blinking up at you with the blank, superior gaze of something that's never once paid rent. It stares long enough for you to feel judged, then flicks its tail and vanishes, leaving ripples that somehow feel sarcastic. The sun presses heat into your shoulders as you wring out your shirt, which now smells faintly of algae and humiliation. Your hands tremble from cold, or maybe from the realization that you've officially crossed the line from lost to chronically unprepared. Still, you can't help staring at the river. It's alive in a way no modern water ever seems to be. Loud, unpredictable, unapologetically itself. It doesn't hum for hydroelectric dams or flow politely around highways. It just exists, and that feels oddly personal. You kneel again, more careful this time, and scoop up a handful. The water slides through your fingers, like glass that forgot to solidify. You drink, ignoring every survivalist documentary you've ever half-watched. It's cold, painfully pure, and somehow bitter, like it knows you're not supposed to be here. You take another sip anyway, because thirst is louder than reason. Somewhere, a bird calls, sharp and distant, as if to say, mistake number one. The world around you hums with motion. Dragonflies flicker across the surface like fragments of green glass. A heron lands upriver, folding its wings with the self-importance of royalty. You watch, hoping for a sign, maybe food, maybe direction, and instead get an audience. A raccoon emerges from the reeds, stares directly at you, and begins washing its hands in the water with exaggerated care, as if to demonstrate how it's supposed to be done. You tell it you're doing your best. It doesn't look convinced. Your stomach growls again, an unhappy reminder that hydration isn't dinner. You consider the possibility of catching a fish, then remember you don't have a hook, net, or competence. You try splashing at a shadow near the edge, and the fish respond by vanishing instantly, leaving you with a wet arm and an inflated sense of futility. The river gurgles, a sound you're pretty sure translates to laughter. You follow the current downstream, barefoot now, because your shoes are heavy with river and regret's lesser cousin, poor timing. The pebbles bruise your soles, but the air is soft and cool, scented with water, mint, and mud. You start to feel something close to calm until you hear the low rush of rapids ahead. The sound deepens, gathering weight, and the path narrows into a channel where the water folds over itself in white curls. It's beautiful, hypnotic, and entirely uninterested in your survival. You crouch at the edge, mesmerized, until you notice footprints bare, human, pressed into damp sand near the bank. They're fresh. You look around, pulse climbing, but the forest holds its breath. No voices, no movement, just the sound of the river dragging its own secrets away. You touch one of the prints, half hoping it's your imagination, but the shape is too large, the stride too sure. Someone else has been here. Recently, the sky darkens, slightly, clouds drifting in like slow spectators. You decide you've collected enough existential dread for one afternoon and move back toward the calmer water. The river shifts its tone as you go, the current whispering rather than roaring, like it's commenting under its breath. You ignore it, though the hair on your arms stands on end. When you finally stop, you sit on a flat rock that juts into the stream. The water slides past, constant and steady, and for a moment, you feel its rhythm align with your own breathing. You could almost call it peaceful, if not for the faint ripple that moves upstream instead of down, vanishing before you can focus on it. You tell yourself it's a trick of light. The river doesn't respond, but you get the feeling it disagrees. The scent finds you before you see anything thin and sharp, curling between the trees like a rumor. It's smoke, real smoke, not the ghost of a campfire or the phantom of burnt toast. This is deliberate, controlled. It smells like charred wood, faint sweetness, and the promise of company or disaster. You freeze for a moment, your brain doing that math it always does in bad ideas, curiosity times hunger divided by self-preservation. The result, as always, is movement. You start walking toward it. The forest changes as you go. The hum of insects softens, replaced by the distant snap of twigs and something else, human rhythm. Not the chaotic noise of a city, but a pattern, footsteps maybe, or the steady strike of wood against wood. You slow down, partly because stealth feels important, partly because tripping over another root would ruin the mystique. Your stomach makes a sound like a trapped animal, and you glare down at it as if that'll help. It doesn't. As the air thickens with smoke, you picture all the possible outcomes. Best case, kind strangers who feed you something warm. Worst case, you're the something warm. You try to convince yourself it's the former, because denial is a valid coping mechanism when you're alone in the 15th century. The trees grow thinner now, the underbrush fading into open ground. You crouch low, which feels ridiculous since you're wearing modern fabric that probably gleams like alien skin in the sunlight. Still, You inch forward, branches scratching your arms, until you spot movement through the haze. There's a fire ringed with stones, flames licking upward in calm rhythm. Around it, figures move with purpose, tall, steady, dressed in hides and woven cloth that blends perfectly into the landscape. One of them stirs something in a pot. Another tends to a bundle of sticks that might be traps or weapons. None of them seem surprised by the wilderness. You're the only element that doesn't belong here. You lean closer for a better look, and that's when your knee finds the loudest stick in North America. The crack echoes through the trees like a gunshot. Every head turns at once. You freeze, mouth open, some primitive instinct telling you that if you stay perfectly still, you'll become invisible. It doesn't work. One of them rises, spear in hand, and calls out something you can't understand. The tone is calm but firm. The universal sound of, "We see you." Stop pretending you're not there. You stand slowly, both hands raised, face arranged into the friendliest expression panic can manage. Your voice decides to squeak on the first word, because betrayal is a theme today. "Hi," you manage, as though that will bridge centuries of cultural difference. The group doesn't move closer yet. They study you with the focus of people who've seen strange things before, but maybe never one quite this pathetic. One of them, a woman, judging by her posture and the authority in her stance, says something to the others. A few step back, but her eyes stay locked on you. She gestures, slow and deliberate, pointing to herself, then to you, then to the ground. "Sit." You get that much. You nod too quickly, tripping on the air as you lower yourself onto the dirt. She approaches, spear still at her side, but her expression isn't cruel. It's curious, measured, like she's deciding whether you're a threat or just lost beyond repair. She says something again, softer this time, and though the words mean nothing, the tone feels almost gentle. You shake your head and mutter, "I don't understand," because obviously she doesn't speak English yet. The realization hits hard. No shortcuts, no translators, no polite small talk. Just two people separated by 5 centuries and a very different idea of normal. She points to the fire, then to your soaked shirt, then back to the fire. The message is clear. You look cold, idiot. You shuffle closer, hands out, grateful and awkward. The heat bites your skin at first, then sinks in, drawing out the chill that's been clinging to you since the river. She watches the steam rise from your sleeves, then glances at your shoes, like they personally offend her. You consider taking them off, but decide humiliation has its limits. The others start murmuring quietly, glancing between you and each other, their voices rising and falling like waves. You catch no words, just tones, some curious, some skeptical. One of the children, bold in the way only children and fools are, edges closer to poke at your sleeve. The fabric fascinates him. You offer a weak smile. He grins back, revealing teeth far too confident for someone who could probably outhunt you by age 10. The woman finally sits across from you, still wary but calmer now. The fire pops between you, a single spark drifting up and vanishing into the blue. For a few heartbeats, nobody speaks. Only the forest does, whispering in wind and wood smoke. You think, absurdly, that this is the closest you've ever been to history, close enough to smell it, close enough to know it's not a story. Then she says something else, a phrase that sounds like a question. You have no idea what it means, but you answer anyway, because silence feels dangerous. "Yeah," you say quietly. She raises one brow, clearly unconvinced, but lets it go. The fire crackles. The smoke shifts. And in that quiet, heavy air, you realize what the forest has been trying to tell you since you arrived. You're not alone anymore, and that's both the best and worst news you could get. The clearing opens like a secret that wasn't meant for you. The trees fall away to reveal a ring of huts built built from bark and patience, smoke rising from low fires that smell of meat and something sweet you can't name. People move through the space with the rhythm of a song you don't know the words, to graceful, efficient, unbothered by your existence. They talk softly, laugh easily, and every gesture carries a meaning you can't decipher. You stand there at the edge, half hidden by a branch, convinced you've just walked into a painting that might eat you if you stare too long. The first person who sees you freezes mid-step. A woman carrying a bundle of sticks stops and tilts her head, eyes narrowing with the kind of calm that usually comes before action. You think about smiling, but your mouth is suddenly dry and confused about how that works. More heads turn, one by one, like flowers tracking the wrong kind of sunlight. The laughter fades. The stillness that replaces it is heavy enough to feel on your skin. You realize you are holding your breath, and that even your heartbeat sounds guilty. Someone calls out, a short phrase that carries authority. Within seconds, 3 men appear from behind one of the huts. They move like they've practiced this before, silent, steady, each holding a spear that looks handmade but disturbingly competent. You raise your hands again, because apparently that's your thing now. "Hi," you say, because words are all you have, and unfortunately, none of them are useful. They don't answer. The woman gestures, and you're guided gently but unmistakably toward the center of the clearing. Every eye follows you. Children peek from behind their mothers, whispering. The air smells of smoke, cooked roots, and something animal. You try not to step on anything important, which is difficult when you don't know the rules. At the center stands an older man, hair streaked with silver, face carved with years of wind and sun. He studies you without fear or welcome, just quiet assessment, like he's deciding whether you're real. When he speaks, the words rise and fall like a story, and you can only catch the cadence, not the meaning. You shake your head, gesture helplessly, point to yourself. "Lost," you say. "I'm lost." You feel ridiculous saying it because, of course you are. Lost isn't even a strong enough word anymore. A murmur ripples through the crowd. Someone laughs softly, not unkindly. The older man lifts a hand, and the sound fades. Then he nods once, almost imperceptibly. You don't know what it means, but a woman steps forward and offers you a bowl made from hollowed wood. Inside is a thick stew that smells like survival. You hesitate, then take it, because turning down food in a prehistoric forest seems like an excellent way to die faster. You eat slowly, aware of every eye on you. The taste is smoky, earthy, strange. There's meat, root vegetables, maybe bark. It's incredible. You nod your thanks, trying to express gratitude through chewing. The woman smiles, just a flicker. And for the first time since you arrived, something in your chest unclenches. As the sun lowers, the clearing softens again. The tension eases. People return to their tasks, though you can still feel their glances, curious but no longer sharp. You sit by the fire, bowl empty, hands warm, body exhausted. The man with the silver hair watches you once more, then says something quietly to the others. You don't understand, but the tone is simple. Acceptance, maybe. Or warning. When darkness falls, someone drapes a fur over your shoulders. It smells like smoke and safety. The laughter starts again somewhere nearby, quiet at first, then rising into the rhythm of life continuing. You sit there, the foreigner in the middle of a story that isn't yours, and realize you've been noticed by history itself. And history, apparently, has very mixed feelings about you. Morning arrives with the sound of crackling fire and soft conversation. You wake under a fir that smells like wet dog and pine sap, blinking at smoke trails rising through a gap in the roof. The air is cold enough to make your breath visible, and for one long moment, you have no idea where you are. Then the ache in your legs, the damp heaviness in your clothes, and the faint memory of being stared at by an entire village return all at once. Right. You've somehow survived the night. That feels like progress. Outside, people are already working, carrying wood, weaving reeds, sharpening tools. The movements are fluid, practiced, like a dance choreographed by necessity. You stand awkwardly near the doorway, trying not to look like a threat, which is easy because you look like a wet laundry pile. Someone notices you and calls out, a short word that sounds both friendly and commanding. You hesitate, then walk toward them, hands visible, heart pretending to be calm. They hand you a wooden bowl filled with something thick and steaming. You stare into it like it might contain the secret to time travel. It smells like burnt pine needles and mystery meat. The man gestures for you to eat, so you take a cautious sip. The flavor hits hard. Smoke, dirt, salt, and something faintly sweet that could be honey or hallucination. You nod, forcing a smile, trying not to look like you just swallowed campfire. He watches you for a beat, then grins. The people nearby laugh, and you realize the food wasn't dangerous. You were the entertainment. The day unfolds in small gestures. Someone hands you a stick and points to a pile of wood. You assume they want firewood and begin hacking at a log with the energy of someone desperate to belong. The stick breaks. They all watch in silence for a moment before one woman sighs, takes the tool from your hands, and shows you how it's actually done. The rhythm is patient and deliberate, the motion a mix of strength and balance. You try again, badly. She doesn't scold, only smirks, then nods as if saying, close enough. You learn by imitation, mimicking the motions of gathering, stacking, and not dying. When someone laughs, it's not cruel anymore. It's acknowledgement, the kind you give a child, taking its first step without falling on its face. You catch a few words here and there, tones that mean yes, no, or maybe stop before you break another thing. Communication is slow but not impossible. They gesture, you nod. They demonstrate, you copy. Trust, apparently, is a muscle that grows from repetition. Later, when the light fades, you sit near the fire again. The smell of cooking fills the air, rich and warm, and someone places a smaller bowl in your hands. This one tastes better meat, herbs, something roasted until it remembers being edible. You eat carefully this time, trying to match their pace, not wanting to seem greedy. When you glance up, you notice the woman who taught you to split wood watching from across the flames. She doesn't smile, not exactly, but her eyes soften. That feels like a victory. A man begins to tell a story, voice rising and falling like a song. You don't understand the words, but the cadence carries emotion, humor, suspense, the communal pull of shared memory. The others laugh at the right moments, their faces bright in the firelight. You catch yourself smiling too, the warmth creeping through your chest in a way the food couldn't. When the story ends, someone passes you a carved cup of something sharp that burns on the way down. You cough, sputter, and nearly spill it. The laughter this time is open, genuine. The old man beside you claps your shoulder and says something that probably translates to lightweight. You grin, dizzy but safe, surrounded by people who have every reason not to trust you but are trying anyway. Later, lying beneath the fur again, you stare up at the ceiling smoke, drifting into the night, and realize how quiet the forest sounds now. Not empty, just calm, as if it's exhaled. Trust, you think, isn't something you earn here by words or promises. It's built one awkward meal, one shared fire, one small mistake at a time. The morning starts with ambition, which is always dangerous. You decide it's time to contribute, to prove you're more than the strange, damp creature who eats their food and stares too long at trees. People are gathering wood near the edge of the clearing, and you march over, chest puffed with purpose, ready to help. Within minutes, you've learned that logs in 1490 do not follow the same rules as logs in your world. They are heavier, slipperier, and apparently resentful. You bend, lift, slip, and create what can only be described as interpretive dance. The woman beside you pauses mid-swing, watching as you nearly drop a branch on your own foot. Her face does not move, but her eyes scream, "Why is this happening?" You try again, manage to lift one, and triumphantly add it to the pile. It immediately rolls off and hits another person. There's a collective silence, the kind that stretches just long enough for shame to bloom. Then someone laughs a sharp, surprised bark that catches like wildfire. Within seconds, the whole group joins in. You stand there, blushing hard enough to generate warmth, while they laugh until tears form. Even the old man who never smiles cracks a grin. You bow dramatically, because if humiliation's inevitable, you might as well pretend it's performance art. After that, you're gently escorted away from the important work and handed a task that even you can't ruin: fire tending. The woman who laughed first, tall, calm, with a face carved from quiet humor, squats beside the ashes and points to the embers. She hands you a bundle of dry grass, then 2 stones, and gestures for you to watch. The rhythm of her hands is hypnotic. Sparks jump, catch, and bloom into flame like it was always meant to be. She glances up, eyes bright with pride, and nods for you to try. You crouch beside her, mimic the motion, and immediately discover you're less of a spark and more of a smudge. The stones clack uselessly. You try again. Nothing. Sweat collects at your temples. She watches, patient but amused. When a faint spark finally appears, you nearly shout in triumph, then overfeed it, and it leaps straight onto your sleeve. For one glorious second, you are fire itself. Then you are panic. You wave your arm wildly until she snatches a hide from the ground and smothers it, muttering something. That sounds like a prayer or a complaint. When the smoke clears, you're left with a singed sleeve, one intact arm, and a chorus of muffled laughter from the group. She shakes her head, a half smile tugging at her lips, and says something short, melodic. You can't understand the words, but the meaning lands easily enough. Almost. You sit back, humbled but oddly proud. The fire crackles between you, steady and alive, and for a fleeting moment, you feel the strange satisfaction of being included, even if only as the village's designated disaster. The woman passes you a small piece of roasted root as consolation. It tastes smoky, sweet, and exactly like progress. Night in the clearing is louder than day ever dares to be. The trees creak and whisper like old neighbors sharing gossip. Insects drone in waves that seem to pulse with your heartbeat. And somewhere out in the dark, something hoots, growls, and then apparently reconsiders its life choices. You lie under firs that smell of smoke and animal, trying not to move, not to breathe, because every sound you make feels like a declaration of vulnerability. The stars overhead are sharp and infinite, so many they seem to hum. You stare at them until your eyes blur, and you start to imagine the sky blinking back. Around the central fire, a handful of people remain awake, silhouettes shifting against the orange glow. Their voices rise and fall in low murmurs, blending with the forest until it's impossible to tell which sounds belong to humans and which belong to the world itself. You roll onto your side, watching them through half-closed eyes. One man gestures animatedly, his hands carving shapes in the air, while others listen, still and attentive. It's storytelling old, real storytelling, the kind that needs no page, no screen, just breath and belief. The woman who taught you fire sits near the flames, her face lit gold in shadow. She doesn't look at you, but somehow you feel included, folded into the edges of their circle. The storyteller's voice deepens, pulling even the wind into silence. You don't understand the words, but you understand tone, awe, fear, laughter that comes from knowing something you probably shouldn't. The story bends and twists through emotion, and when the man gestures to the moon, rising pale and full above the trees, you catch the thread. It's about a spirit, a trickster, or a thief who steals the moon to keep the night for himself. You picture it. Some cosmic magpie, pocketing the light because it likes the way shadows feel. The others lean closer, caught between terror and delight, and you find yourself doing the same. The man's voice softens, his hands describing circles, and the flames seem to answer, flickering higher, as if the story itself is feeding them. You're aware of your own heartbeat now, steady and slow, syncing with the rhythm of the tale. Then he stops suddenly, letting the silence stretch just long enough for the forest to breathe again. You don't need a translation to know that's the end. The tension breaks with laughter, warm and relieved, like everyone has escaped the story's grasp together. You exhale without realizing you'd been holding it. Someone tosses another branch onto the fire, and the sparks leap upward, colliding with the stars. The woman catches your eye for the first time that night and says something in a soft, teasing tone. You shrug helplessly, muttering, "No clue what you said, but I'm going to assume it's kind." She smirks, then points to the sky. You follow her gaze. The moon hangs bright and whole, untouched by spirits or thieves. She nods once, satisfied, and turns back to the flames. You whisper, "Yes, still there," to no one in particular. The hours slide past in warmth and rhythm. Someone hums a tune low, haunting, built from notes that feel older than any instrument. It drifts through the clearing like a lullaby meant for the earth itself. Children sleep beside their mothers, their small faces twitching with dreams. The fire pops, releasing a spiral of smoke that carries the scent of sap and cedar. You realize how long it's been since you've felt this kind of quiet, the kind that isn't absence but presence. It's the hum of belonging, fragile but real. When the circle thins and people retreat into their shelters, you stay awake, watching the last embers fade. The forest doesn't sleep, it shifts. Frogs sing from the river, something rustles in the brush, and a night breeze ghosts across your face. You pull the fur tighter around your shoulders and listen. Every sound has a purpose. Every movement feels deliberate. The night isn't empty, it's full, overflowing with life that has no reason to care about you, yet somehow allows your existence. You think about the story again, about the spirit who tried to steal the moon. You wonder if maybe it wasn't theft at all, maybe it was loneliness, a desire to hold on to something bright in the dark. You close your eyes, the thought lingering like the aftertaste of smoke. Somewhere far away, a wolf howls, long and low, and the sound threads through the trees like a reminder that the world is awake and watching. You lie still, listening until the howl fades into nothing, until the fire sighs its last ember into blackness. The forest hums, the moon stays where it belongs, and slowly, the noise becomes a kind of peace you didn't know you could feel. The morning starts with chaos disguised as organization. People are trading things: baskets for flint, hides for dried meat, bones for something shiny that might be currency or just decoration. It's hard to tell where the economy ends and the gossip begins. You stand at the edge of it all, empty-handed and painfully aware that your net worth currently consists of pocket lint and misplaced confidence. Then you remember your jacket, specifically the zipper. You tug it down halfway, and the metallic rasp catches attention like a bird call. A few heads turn. One man frowns, intrigued but suspicious, as if you've just produced witchcraft from polyester. You demonstrate again, slower this time, sliding the teeth together and apart. The group leans in, murmuring. Someone reaches out and touches it, hesitates, then slides it up and down with the reverence usually reserved for sacred relics. You try to explain it's just a zipper, but language barriers make "just" hard to translate. A woman offers you a string of beads in exchange, carved bone, smooth from use. You hesitate, unsure whether that's fair, but she's already pushing it into your hand. The trade is done. You've officially entered the barter system armed with the power of mediocre fashion. Feeling bold, you dig through your pockets and find a single button, chipped and useless to you, but apparently gold-tier novelty here. They gather around again, examining it like it might hatch. The man with the flint blade inspects the holes, muttering something that probably means magic pebble with eyes. You shrug and let him have it. In return, he gives you a small fish hook carved from bone and a look that says, "Let's see what you can do." That's how you find yourself by the river again, knee-deep in cold water, holding a stick that barely qualifies as a fishing rod. The woman who laughed at your fire-making attempts is with you, demonstrating the proper way to cast. She's graceful, precise, efficient. You are none of those things. Your line tangles itself mid-air and lands in the reeds behind you. She doesn't laugh, but her silence is very loud. You untangle the mess, try again, and manage to splash enough to scare away anything with gills within a 5-mile radius. She adjusts your stance, moving your hands with quick, sure gestures. Her touch is firm but patient, and you feel like a child being taught how to exist. When the line finally hits the water properly, you almost cheer, but she hushes you instantly. Patience, apparently, is a key ingredient. The river slides past, indifferent to your effort, and you begin to understand why fishing is both meditation and madness. Minutes stretch. Your shoulders ache. You imagine the fish watching from below, laughing in bubbles. Then there's a tug, sharp and unexpected. You freeze, heart skipping. The woman says something urgent, motioning for you to pull. You do. Too hard. The line snaps, the hook vanishes, and you nearly fall backward into the current. She exhales through her nose, not quite disappointed, more like she's just witnessed an impressive display of statistical unluckiness. Still, she wades over, places another hook in your palm, and mimics the motion again. You follow, slower this time, gentler. When the next fish bites, you let her guide your hands. Together, you pull it from the water, a small silver creature thrashing against gravity. For a moment, it's alive in your hands, wet and perfect. She grins, teeth flashing in triumph, and says something that sounds approving. You can't stop smiling, ridiculous and proud. The fish ends up cooked over the fire that evening, split in half, shared between you. It tastes mostly like smoke and bone, but the pride adds flavor. Around you, people talk, laugh, trade stories you can't follow but somehow feel part of. The woman nudges your shoulder, points at your empty pockets, and raises an eyebrow. You shrug and mime zipping air. She laughs, shaking her head. You've run out of trinkets, out of modern proof that you belong to another world. But tonight, sitting by the fire with ash on your skin and salt on your tongue, you realize you don't need them anymore. The trade was fair. They got curiosity, and you got something better. A small, shining piece of belonging, caught like a fish, and just as hard-earned. Sleep comes slow, like it's negotiating. You lie on your back, staring at the roof of the hut, tracing the faint seams of smoke stains that look almost deliberate, like constellations made by accident. The air smells of char and pine, and whatever passed for dinner, fat sizzling over fire, still lingering in the walls. It's comforting, in the way exhaustion makes everything softer. You drift somewhere between waking and not, and the forest seeps into your dreams without asking permission. You dream in scents instead of pictures. The acrid sweetness of sap, the musk of fir, the heavy, smoky breath of something watching just beyond the firelight. It's strange, vivid, so real you could taste it. You wake once to find the fire still glowing, orange veins running through ash, and the low hum of someone snoring nearby. When you close your eyes again, you fall straight back into the same smell, a mix of wet bark and the faint iron edge of blood. Your brain, apparently, has decided smell is the new visual language. By morning, you're groggy but restless. The air outside is sharp with frost and cooking smoke. You find the storyteller near the fire pit, shaping thin sheets of birch bark into something that looks like both art and function. His face is carved with lines that look like laughter had to fight its way in, but eventually won. You try to describe your dreams through gestures, pantomiming, sniffing the air like a deranged bloodhound. He watches with a patient half-smile, nodding as though this sort of conversation is a perfectly normal start to the day. When you mime smoke and point upward, he seems to understand. He taps his chest, then his forehead, and says a word that might mean vision or possibly sinus problem. You can't be sure. Still, he motions for you to sit. A few others gather, drawn by curiosity or boredom, and he begins to speak in a tone both serious and amused. You catch none of the language, but his gestures fill in the blanks, dreams rising from the fire, spirits traveling in scent, meanings hiding where words can't reach. He listens to you, describe more, or at least the noises you make trying to, then tilts his head and grins. The crowd chuckles, and you know instantly that whatever he said about you was funny. Someone pats your shoulder. Another covers their mouth to hide laughter. You ask, "What did he say?" Even though you know no one will answer in English. The woman who taught you fire leans in and, after a long pause, attempts to translate. Her accent is thick, the words halting, but you catch enough. "You trip often," she says, fighting a smile, "but rise, strangely." The laughter erupts again, but it's not cruel. It's warm, shared, affectionate in its absurdity. You can't help but laugh too, because honestly, that might be the most accurate description of your entire existence so far. You mime tripping, then standing again with exaggerated triumph, which earns another round of laughter. The storyteller slaps his knee, grinning wide enough to show teeth, and mutters something approving. When the crowd disperses, he hands you one of the birch bark sheets. It's marked with tiny symbols burned into the surface, loops, lines, and circles that might mean something or nothing at all. He taps his temple again, then the bark, then gestures toward the sky. You think it's a message. Remember what you dream, even if it smells weird. Later, you sit by the river with the bark in your lap, tracing the edges where the flame had kissed it. The smell of smoke clings to your fingers, the same scent from your dream. The air tastes cleaner here, the kind of cold that makes the world feel newly washed. You breathe deep, and for a moment, it's like the forest exhales with you. You don't know if dreams here mean something more than the restless filing cabinet of the mind, but the thought lingers. Maybe it's not about prophecy or messages. Maybe it's about being seen by the land, the people, even your own unsteady reflection in the river. The storyteller's words echo, translated poorly, but perfect anyway. Trip often, rise strangely. You smile to yourself. That, you think, is a story you might actually be able to tell someday. The day starts with laughter, which is usually a bad sign. You wake to find half the camp gathered near the fire, eyes glinting with the kind of anticipation usually reserved for someone else's humiliation. The woman who taught you fire gestures for you to join, and when you do, she says something short and bright that makes the crowd chuckle. You can't tell if she's being kind or preparing you for public embarrassment, which, given the pattern of your life lately, feels like a 50-50 split. The storyteller, the same man who interpreted your dream smells, stands in the center. He holds a stick, carved with patterns you suspect aren't decorative, but you pretend to admire them anyway, nodding solemnly like you understand. He points at you, then says a word that sounds like thunder and laughter colliding. The crowd repeats it, rhythm building, and you realize you're the subject. You look around for context. None arrives. Then one of the hunters, steps forward and mimics you walking, exaggerated, loose-limbed, head tilted skyward. He bumps into a tree with a satisfying thump, staggers back, and groans dramatically. The crowd erupts. Even the old man who rarely speaks is smiling, his eyes bright with mischief. You sigh because, of course, this is your legacy now. You remember the exact incident they're reenacting. 2 days ago, trying to carry firewood and wave off mosquitoes, you'd managed to collide with a pine so wide you couldn't even pretend it moved into your path. The noise had drawn attention from half the clearing. Apparently, it had drawn inspiration too. The storyteller raises his voice, still smiling, and speaks again, this time slower, deliberate. You catch the rhythm ceremonial, maybe even sacred, though the content sounds suspiciously like comedy. He motions for silence, then points at you with the carved stick. The crowd watches, expectant. You try to look dignified, but dignity is hard when you're the punchline. He says the word again, the one they've been chanting, and taps your chest with the stick. The air shifts. The laughter softens into approval. Even through the haze of confusion, you feel the meaning settle in. This isn't mockery, it's initiation. A name, born from your own ridiculousness, given in the same spirit, they share everything else with honesty and warmth. You repeat the sound carefully, clumsily, which triggers another ripple of laughter, but it's friendlier now. You say it again, louder, and they cheer. The woman grins, pats your shoulder, and says the translation in halting English, walks into trees. You can't help it, you laugh until your ribs ache. Somehow, it fits perfectly. They paint a small mark on your forearm with ash and water, a dark smudge that dries into the faint shape of a branch. It's a sign, they explain through gesture, of joining, of belonging. You nod, humbled, amused, slightly bruised. As the crowd disperses, you catch your reflection in a pool of water near the edge of camp. You look wild, strange, and impossibly alive. The name echoes in your mind, funny, flawed, entirely yours. You whisper it once under your breath and smile, because somehow walking into trees feels like progress. You wake to a sky that looks half-finished clouds painted in uneven strokes, light bleeding between them like the world's still deciding what mood it's in. The air feels heavy with the kind of damp that predicts trouble, or at least discomfort. You're sent out with a young hunter whose name you can't pronounce, though you've mentally labeled him Doesn't Blink. He carries a bow with the confidence of someone who's never missed, and you carry a basket with the confidence of someone who's never successfully completed a task without breaking something. The odds seem even. He gestures toward the tree line and says a string of words that sound purposeful. You nod, pretending to understand, and follow him into the forest. The world closes around you, branches knit overhead, shadows move like liquid. You've grown used to the noise of this place, but today it's quiet in a way that doesn't feel polite. Your companion walks ahead without a sound. You, meanwhile, step on every twig within a 50-foot radius. You reach a small clearing filled with green leaves, stems, the faint shimmer of dew still clinging to them. The hunter crouches, points to a cluster of plants, and motions for you to pick. You do, clumsily, but with enthusiasm, filling the basket while pretending you know what any of these are for. He glances up occasionally, expression unreadable, which you've decided means mild tolerance. The sun peeks through the branches, thin but warm, and for a brief moment, you let yourself think, maybe this is going well. Then the forest changes temperature. The air shifts, heavier, colder. Birds stop their endless commentary. The hunter stiffens, every muscle coiled, his hand going to the bow before you even understand why. That's when you hear it, a low growl, long and deliberate, like thunder's smaller, angrier cousin. At the edge of the clearing stands a wolf. It's larger than you expect, larger than most things should be, fur mottled gray and white, eyes the color of old coins. It watches you both, unhurried, perfectly aware of its position in the food chain. The hunter raises his bow, slow, steady, waiting for something. You hold your breath, because exhaling suddenly feels like an act of aggression. You try to whisper, "It's just curious, right?" But your voice cracks, betraying your optimism. The wolf takes a step forward, paws silent against the moss, and your mind begins cataloging every poor life choice that led to this moment. You glance at the hunter, who hasn't moved. His calm is both impressive and infuriating. The wolf snarls softly, the sound vibrating through the air, through you, through the realization that you are not equipped for this century. Then, just as quickly, it stops. The animal tilts its head, ears twitching toward some distant sound you can't hear. After another beat, it turns and melts back into the trees, silent as smoke. The forest exhales with it. You don't, not for several seconds. When you finally do, it's an ugly, shaky gasp that makes the hunter glance back at you, amused. He lowers his bow, says something short. Probably, "You can breathe now." You laugh, too loud, because humor is the only shield you have left. "Tell him I blinked," you mutter to no one in particular. He smiles, a small, rare thing, and taps his chest, then yours, then gestures toward the trees where the wolf disappeared. You think he's saying something like, "We walk their paths now." It feels almost poetic until you trip over a root and drop half the herbs. The smile turns into a full grin. On the way back, the sky finally decides to rain, slow and cold at first, then steadier. You both keep walking, drenched and silent, until the village lights appear through the trees. Your heart still beats too fast, your clothes cling, and your brain replays the sound of that growl in endless loops. But beneath the leftover fear, there's something else, something wild and electric humming in your bones. Maybe it's adrenaline, or maybe it's the forest, teaching you in its own brutal way what belonging really costs. Night comes slowly, as if the world is catching its breath. The last scraps of sunset fade behind the tree line, leaving the sky to build itself from scratch, first deep blue, then black velvet stitched with pinholes of light. The air hums with that familiar rhythm of crickets and fire crackle, but everything feels sharper, like the darkness itself is paying attention. You sit by the dying fire, wrapped in a hide that still smells faintly of rain and wood smoke, trying to shake the chill that sneaks into your bones whenever the wind shifts. The storyteller sits across from you, tracing lines in the dirt with a stick, his voice low and patient. He's teaching you about the stars, not in the way you learned back home, with constellations named after Greek drama and misplaced hubris, but the way they tell it here, stories you can't find in any telescope or textbook. The stars aren't pictures, he says through gestures and broken words, but memories, light that remembers where it came from. You watch his hand move, connecting invisible points, and try to follow the path. You fail spectacularly. He laughs softly, not unkindly, and tilts your chin toward the sky. You squint, trying to see what he sees. The stars look the same as they always have, bright, indifferent, eternal. But then he starts to hum, a low, rhythmic sound that threads through the night air, and slowly you begin to notice something. The stars don't just sit there, they pulse. They shimmer in patterns that feel deliberate, almost conversational. One blinks out behind a wisp of cloud and reappears like punctuation. It's not speech, exactly, but it's close. You point upward, naming one with the confidence of a child naming clouds. "That one," you say, "looks like something important." He nods, pleased with your useless contribution, and says a word that might mean yes or obvious. He draws a wide arc with his hand and taps his chest. You think he's saying it's part of him, part of everyone. You stare longer, letting the idea sink in that every flicker above is a story mid-sentence, still being written across centuries of sky. The fire sputters behind you, sending sparks spiraling up to join the stars, and for a second you can't tell where the flame ends and the cosmos begins. The villagers murmur softly nearby, voices blending with the whisper of wind through the trees. Someone laughs, low and distant. The world feels vast, endless, but somehow close enough to touch. You lie back on the grass, the cold pressing through your clothes, and the sky fills your vision until everything else disappears. The storyteller joins you, still humming. He raises his hand and begins naming the lights, one by one. His voice is reverent, steady. You don't understand the words, but the rhythm tells you enough. These stars aren't gods or myths. They're markers, reminders of where people have walked, what they've built, what they've lost. You imagine generations sitting just like this, watching the same sky, passing down directions not just for land, but for memory. It hits you all at once how small you are and how strangely comforting that feels. You think about home, about the city lights that drowned out all of this, how you used to look up and see nothing but the glow of your own distractions. Here, the dark doesn't hide the stars, it reveals them. The silence doesn't feel empty, it feels full, like the earth itself is listening. You realize you've been holding your breath again, so you let it go, watching it rise in a faint mist that disappears into the night. The storyteller stops humming and gestures for you to mimic him. You hum, off-key and awkward, but he doesn't laugh. He listens, nodding slowly, then joins in until your mismatched tones blend into something almost pleasant. The stars above seem to shimmer brighter, or maybe your eyes are just wet from smoke or wonder you can't tell anymore. When the song fades, he speaks one more word, soft and deliberate, pointing first to the sky, then to you. You don't need a translation. You know what he means. The stars are rules, yes, but not the kind that confine. They're reminders to look up, to remember, to keep moving even when the map makes no sense. You lie there, long after he's gone, tracing your own invisible shapes between the stars. They don't spell your name or your story, not yet, but they're patient. The sky always is. It waits, endless and quiet, for you to learn how to read it properly. The first snow arrives without ceremony. One moment the world is only gray and damp, the next it's full of ghosts falling from the sky. You watch the flakes drift through the air, slow and silent, like ash that smells clean instead of burnt. The children laugh, chasing them with open mouths, but the adults move faster, quieter. They don't look up at the sky with wonder. They look down at the ground with calculation. That's how you know this isn't decoration, it's warning. By morning, the forest is unrecognizable. What used to be paths are now smooth, endless blankets of white, deceptive in their softness. The air bites at your nose until it stings, and every breath feels like swallowing glass. Fires take longer to start, and when they do, they burn greedy, devouring every scrap of wood, as if they, too, know what's coming. You help carry logs back to camp, hands stiff and clumsy, and when you finally sit near the fire, the heat barely touches you. It's a cruel trick of winter. It teaches you that warmth can exist inches away and still not belong to you. Food changes first. The meals grow thinner, the bowls lighter. The laughter that usually fills the nights dulls to a murmur. You've stopped asking what kind of meat is in the stew. Now you just pray there's any at all. The hunters leave before dawn and return at dusk, faces carved from exhaustion and frost. Sometimes they bring back rabbits. Sometimes they bring back nothing. You start measuring time not in hours, but in footsteps between hunger and fire. One morning, you wake to find the world buried deeper. Snow crawls over everything like it's trying to claim it back. The cold has a sound now, a high, constant hum that fills your ears until thought itself feels frozen. The woman who once taught you fire tosses a fur at your chest and points toward the woods. You follow, half because she's your closest thing to a friend, and half because staying still feels dangerous. You walk and walk. The snow creaks underfoot, rhythm steady as a heartbeat. Each exhale turns to mist that floats away before you can see where it goes. The cold wraps around your legs, your fingers, your thoughts. She says something in her language, short, sharp, almost rhythmic, and you realize she's not talking to you. She's speaking to the cold, or maybe against it. You try repeating the sounds under your breath, fumbling them, turning prayer into parody. She glances over, hides a smile, and keeps walking. The forest is a maze of white and silence. Everything feels slower here, like time itself is shivering. You stumble once, twice, maybe 3 times. It's hard to keep track when every part of your body protests motion. She doesn't stop to help, just gestures for you to keep moving. The rule is simple: stop, and the cold wins. You start to understand that walking isn't travel here, it's defiance. Hours pass, though they feel like days. You learn the art of small victories, keeping your breath steady, keeping your hands moving, not collapsing when your knees beg for it. When you finally stop, it's not by choice, but necessity. She kneels, brushes away snow to reveal a hollow space lined with greenish moss. A cache. Inside are roots, dried berries, a piece of smoked meat so small it looks like hope rationed. She divides it without hesitation, handing you half. It tastes like smoke and salt and mercy. The walk back feels shorter, maybe because you're lighter, or maybe because you've run out of fear to carry. The wind rises, sharp and wild, howling through the trees like something alive. You pull your fur tighter and keep pace. Every step feels deliberate now, a kind of prayer carved into the snow. The rhythm of it settles deep in your chest. Step, breathe, step, breathe. It's not survival anymore. It's conversation. When you reach camp, the others are gathered around a low fire, faces illuminated by the soft, trembling light. The storyteller looks up, says something that makes them laugh quietly, even now, even in this. You drop beside the fire, steam rising from your clothes, and the warmth finally reaches you, not just the heat, but the shared silence, the pulse of life stubbornly refusing to stop. Later, lying beneath the firs, you listen to the wind battering the walls. It sounds like it's trying to get in. You close your eyes and whisper the strange words the woman spoke, half remembered, half invented. The cold presses close, but doesn't cross the threshold. You're learning the rhythm now, the rules of the sky, the patience of fire, the stubbornness of walking. You don't know if it's prayer or survival. Maybe they're the same thing. The day begins in silence. Even the forest seems to have forgotten how to make sound. Snow stretches unbroken in every direction, gleaming too brightly to be trusted. You walk carefully, each step a negotiation between balance and dignity, the kind of truce you know you'll lose eventually. The cold bites at your ears and crawls up your sleeves despite every layer of fur and willpower. Breath comes out in white bursts that hang in the air longer than they should, as if reluctant to leave you behind. The woman walks ahead, her steps light, her path deliberate. You follow, trying not to step exactly where she does, but always ending up doing it anyway. She doesn't look back often, just enough to make sure you're still alive and not an oddly shaped pile of snow. The river you've been following all season has hardened now, locked beneath a glassy shell that creaks and groans like it's thinking about breaking just to see what would happen. You stick close to the bank, where reeds poke through the ice like the last stubborn thoughts of summer. You're collecting water, or trying to, when you notice something beneath the frozen surface. At first, it looks like a trick of light, the kind that plays games with your peripheral vision when you're too cold to blink. But then you crouch, scrape away a thin layer of frost, and see it clearly. Lines carved into the rock below, not random cracks but deliberate shapes, spirals, hands, marks that seem to hum with old intention. You call out, voice cracking like the ice beneath it. The woman comes over, crouches beside you, and stares for a long time. She doesn't speak right away. Her breath fogs the surface, and she wipes it away gently, reverently. Then she looks at you with an expression you can't quite place, part wonder, part warning. She traces one of the spirals with her finger, careful not to touch the ice, then touches her chest and the ground. The gesture is simple but weighted. You understand enough. These are not just pictures. They are memories. You kneel closer, trying to imagine the hands that made them. Maybe they stood here centuries ago, on the same bank, staring at the same sky, carving something they didn't want time to erase. You wonder if they knew the cold would preserve their story better than any book ever could. The thought makes your chest ache in a way that feels older than fear. The woman begins to hum quietly, a tune low and steady. You've heard it before during ceremonies, when the air is thick with smoke and meaning. Now, in the open cold, it sounds different, lonelier, but also clearer. You stay quiet, letting the sound weave through the stillness. The ice seems to listen too, the faintest crack echoing like a sigh. When the humming fades, she pulls a small bone knife from her belt and gestures for you to hand over your stick, the one you've been using as a walking aid since the last time you insulted gravity. You pass it to her. She kneels, scratches a small mark near the edge of the riverbank 3, intersecting lines, simple and deliberate. Then she presses the knife into your hand. It takes you a second to understand what she wants. Your first thought is that this is wildly inappropriate archaeology. Your second thought is quieter. Maybe this is participation, not intrusion. You kneel beside her and carve a small circle next to hers, the blade trembling in your cold, stiffened grip. It's nothing fancy, just a shape, a record of existing. When you finish, she nods, satisfied, and covers it lightly with snow. The act feels sacred in its smallness. As you walk back toward camp, you keep glancing over your shoulder, half expecting the ice to shift, to rearrange itself, to swallow the past again. It doesn't. The carvings remain, glinting faintly under the pale sun, like the earth is blinking at you slowly. The wind picks up, scattering fine powder across the surface until everything looks smooth again. But you know what's underneath. You helped add to it. That night, the fire burns lower than usual. The cold sneaks in through the gaps in the shelter walls, but you hardly notice. You keep thinking about those marks, about how history isn't just what gets written down, but what refuses to disappear. You think about the way the woman's hum had matched the rhythm of the wind, how your small circle now sits among stories older than anything you could name. You fall asleep to the sound of the fire cracking softly, and for once the cold doesn't bite. The world outside may be frozen, but somewhere beneath it, memory is still moving slow, patient, and alive. The wind shifts before they arrive. It always does. One moment it's the same endless cold hum you've grown used to, and then suddenly it carries something new, voices, low and sharp, cutting through the trees like flint on stone. The dogs are the first to notice. They lift their heads, ears twitching, then go quiet in perfect unison. Even the fire seems to hold its breath. You're halfway through attempting to repair a pair of snow-crusted boots that aren't technically yours when you feel it too, that ripple of unease that moves through a place right before something changes. They appear from the tree line just as the sun sinks low, a small group wrapped in hides that move with the wind. They're taller than most in your camp, their faces lined in ways that don't look like age but experience. Every movement is efficient, cautious, like they've already mapped every possible threat, and you're on that list somewhere near the top. You stand up too quickly, which is a mistake both because your foot catches on the boots and because there's no graceful way to look non-threatening while flailing. The woman who taught you fire mutters something behind you that sounds suspiciously like, "Don't." You do it anyway. You raise your hand in what you hope is a universal gesture of friendliness, the sort that says, "Hello, I am not a danger," just profoundly, out of place. The new arrivals don't wave back. One of them tilts his head slightly, eyes narrow. You lower your hand halfway, unsure if you're supposed to stop or bow or just vanish into the snow. You settle on standing very still, which feels like the safest option. Introductions happen in the way they always do here, slowly, carefully, through glances and body language, and whatever translation can be cobbled together between gestures and patience. The storyteller speaks for your group, his tone calm and steady, each word deliberate. The newcomers respond in clipped phrases you can't decipher. You try to read the mood and fail immediately. They don't seem hostile, exactly, just unconvinced, like they're assessing whether your entire existence is a temporary inconvenience or a long-term problem. When they finally acknowledge you directly, it's with a question that sounds short but lands heavy. The woman beside you translates roughly, "Where are you from?" You open your mouth, realize that the future, probably, is not the correct answer, and instead point vaguely in a random direction. It's the kind of lie that has no coordinates. They look at each other, unimpressed. You add, "far," because distance sounds safer than explanation. That earns a grunt, which you choose to interpret as acceptance. The evening grows colder as they set up camp beside yours. The air between the two groups is taut, like the snow itself might crack if anyone laughs too loudly. Naturally, that's when you do. Someone slips on the ice near the fire pit. Nothing serious, just a quick, dramatic flail, and you let out an involuntary snort before you can stop it. The sound cuts through the quiet like an arrow. Every head turns. You freeze, halfway between apology and suffocation. Then, unexpectedly, one of the newcomers chuckles. Just once, a small sound that's quickly swallowed by the wind. The tension shifts slightly, no longer brittle, just wary. The others start to relax, shoulders lower, hands ease off knife handles. The hunter who's been watching you the whole time tosses something small toward you. A piece of dried meat, tough but edible. A peace offering, or maybe just an experiment. You catch it clumsily and nod in thanks, chewing like it's fine cuisine. He smirks, mutters something to his companion, and for the first time, it doesn't sound like suspicion. Later, as the fires burn low, you listen to the two groups trade stories in fragments of language and gesture. Laughter starts small but grows, layered with the rhythm of shared survival. You sit slightly apart, half part of it and half not, aware of how thin the line between belonging and intrusion can be. You wrap your fur tighter around your shoulders and let the warmth reach where it can. When the wind rises again, it carries the faint sound of drums, someone from the new group tapping rhythm into the night. You find yourself tapping back, offbeat but trying. One of them glances over, smiling in a way that feels like permission. It's not acceptance yet, but it's the first spark of it, the kind that might survive the next storm if you're careful. You fall asleep to that rhythm, wind and laughter, fire and distance, and realize that maybe this is what it means to live here. To stand between worlds, uninvited but still trying to listen closely enough to learn the language of survival. It starts as a sound, not a sight, a croak sharp enough to slice through wind and thought alike. You look up, squinting against the pale sky, and there it is, a raven, black against the gray, circling with the kind of deliberate laziness only confidence allows. It makes another call, louder this time, and you swear it's saying something. The woman beside you glances up, frowns, and mutters a word you don't know but have learned to interpret by tone alone. It means trouble, or maybe you again. The bird follows you for 3 days, not closely, but persistently, always at the edge of your sight like an unpaid bill. You tell yourself it's coincidence, that birds exist everywhere, but even you can't miss the pattern. It perches near camp when you eat, lands ahead of you on the path when you walk, and sometimes, in the stillest moments, you hear it make a sound that feels just shy of laughter. The others notice too. They whisper when they think you're not listening, glancing at the bird and then at you like it's your fault for existing so appetizingly to the supernatural. When you finally ask what the bird means, the storyteller doesn't answer right away. He studies the raven for a long moment, the way one might look at a problem they'd hoped had already solved itself. Then he says, slowly, that ravens come for those who owe something, a debt, a promise, a piece of unfinished life. You try to explain that you don't owe anyone anything, except maybe a few library fines a few centuries from now, but that doesn't seem relevant. He only shrugs, as if to say that debt has its own way of keeping track. You decide to make peace. It's early morning when you set a piece of jerky on the snow and back away with exaggerated diplomacy. The raven hops forward, head cocked, eyes so dark they swallow reflection. It studies the offering, then studies you, and takes the jerky with a single, decisive motion. You feel triumphant for approximately 3 seconds until it swoops down again and snatches the knife from your belt. You shout, stumbling backward as it climbs effortlessly into the air, flashing black wings and smugness. The hunter who saw the whole thing laughs so hard he can barely stand. Between breaths, he manages to say something that sounds suspiciously like, "It chose wisely." The rest of the camp joins in, and now the story is everywhere before you can protest. You, the person who bartered with a spirit bird and came out in debt again, the woman who once taught you fire shakes, her head muttering under her breath, and presses a spare knife into your hand, smaller and duller, the kind of tool given to children or fools. You can't tell which she thinks you are. The raven returns the next morning, knife still clutched in its beak. It lands on a branch above the fire and stares down at you with impossible intelligence. You point at it, muttering, "That's mine," but it only tilts its head as if unimpressed by ownership. Then, in a single, smooth motion, it drops the knife into the snow at your feet and flies off without a sound. The others watch, whispering again. The storyteller grins and says, "It spoke twice." You ask what that means, and he only answers, "It's listening now." You stare after the bird, its shape shrinking into the pale horizon, and feel something shift small, strange, unexplainable. Maybe it's relief, maybe it's curiosity, or maybe it's the understanding that some debts don't ask for payment, only acknowledgement. The knife sits in the snow, blade catching a glint of weak sunlight. You pick it up, colder now, heavier somehow. That night, when the fire burns low and the stars blink between clouds, you think you hear the raven again. Not close, just far enough to be part of the wind. A double call, short, sharp, final. You can't tell if it's saying goodbye or keeping count. You lie back on your furs, staring into the dark, half smiling. Somewhere out there, a bird with your knife-shaped reflection in its memory has decided you're worth remembering too. Winter's grip loosens just enough for celebration to feel possible. The snow still lies thick across the clearing, but the air holds a strange gentleness tonight, as if the cold has agreed to stay outside the circle of firelight just this once. The villagers move with quiet excitement, arranging hides, stacking logs, preparing food that smells too rich to be real. Smoke curls up into the star-heavy sky, carrying hints of roasted meat, herbs, and pine. You can taste it in the air before you even sit down. Someone hands you a carved bowl, warm and fragrant. You don't ask what's inside because the answer never helps, and you've learned that gratitude tastes better than clarity. Around you, the people gather, faces soft in the fire's glow, voices weaving together into that peculiar rhythm of celebration that doesn't need music to feel like a song. The storyteller begins to hum. The children echo him, and soon the entire camp is swaying, not in unison, but in understanding. You eat slowly, trying not to seem overeager, though your stomach betrays you with an audible growl. The woman who taught you fire elbows you lightly, smirking. She says something teasing that you can't translate but understand perfectly from the way she raises her eyebrows. You grin back, mouth full, trying to look dignified and failing completely. She laughs, sharp and bright, and that single sound draws more eyes toward you. Suddenly, you are aware of being the evening's new entertainment. The storyteller gestures for silence, and the group quiets. He looks at you with a mischievous glint, says your name or his version of it, and the crowd chuckles. Then he begins an impression of you. It's not flattering. He mimics your walk, exaggerated and wobbly, your confused expressions, your attempts at language that end somewhere between bravery and nonsense. The audience howls with laughter, clutching their sides. Even the elders, who rarely show emotion, are smiling. You're mortified, but only a little, because it's true, and because they're laughing with you, not at you. It's the sound of affection disguised as mockery. When his act ends, they all look to you expectantly. Your instinct tells you to bow out gracefully, but your pride, or maybe survival instinct, has other ideas. So you stand, raise your bowl in a toast that no one understands, and launch into your own impression of yourself. You puff out your chest, widen your eyes dramatically, and stumble across the snow, muttering gibberish that vaguely sounds like their language if heard underwater. You mime tripping over invisible roots, point to the stars as if you've discovered them for the first time, and end by pretending to argue with a tree. It's absurd, theatrical, borderline unhinged. The first laugh comes from the woman beside the fire, then another, and then it spreads, fast and loud, rolling through the crowd like thunder breaking loose. Someone wipes tears from their eyes. A child imitates your imitation, falling over on purpose just to earn more laughter. The storyteller slaps his knee and says something that sounds approving. The fire pops and crackles, bright sparks leaping into the cold air, and for the first time, you don't feel like an outsider watching from the edges of someone else's life. You're in it, messy, ridiculous, human. They start to chant your name, or at least the closest thing they have for it, between bursts of laughter. You bow, mock serious, and nearly slip again, which earns a fresh round of applause. Someone hands you a drink that burns like pine and honey, and you drink it too fast. Warmth floods your chest, spreads outward, and you feel lighter than you have since waking up in this impossible century. The celebration continues deep into the night. Stories are told, songs rise and fall, drums appear from nowhere. The air smells of smoke and joy. The moon climbs higher, pale and perfect, watching it all unfold with detached amusement. You sit beside the fire, still grinning, your cheeks sore from smiling. The woman leans over, murmurs something you can't catch, and gestures toward the crowd. Whatever she says, it makes you laugh again. You realize, sitting there, that laughter here is more than noise. It's language, bridge, medicine. It's how people remind the world they're still alive in a place that sometimes forgets. You look around at the faces lit by the fire, faces that once studied you with suspicion, now open and familiar, and something inside you shifts. The cold, the hunger, the endless trying, they all fade for a moment. You laugh again, freely this time, because for once it's not survival forcing it out of you, it's belonging. And in the middle of this frozen world, surrounded by fire and the echo of your own ridiculousness, that feels like the warmest thing you've ever known. You climb the ridge because someone has to, and because pretending you volunteered sounds nobler than admitting you were following curiosity uphill. The snow crunches beneath your boots, thin crust breaking with every step. The air up here feels different, older maybe, or just thinner. You stop once to catch your breath and watch the world spread below you. The river coiled like a silver thread, the forest stretching outward in every direction until it blurs into horizon. It's a view that should make you feel free, but instead, it makes you feel observed. There's something about the silence that doesn't quite behave like silence. It hums. You kneel near a cluster of stones half buried in frost and notice patterns, grooves too clean to be natural, shapes that hint at intention. You brush the snow away with numb fingers, revealing marks cut into the rock. Sharp, deliberate, patient. A tool was here. A hand guided it. Someone long before you stood in this same place and decided to carve permanence out of something that doesn't easily allow it. You call out instinctively, even though no one's close enough to hear. Your voice bounces off the ridge and returns to you, slightly altered, thinner, almost shy. It's unsettling how quickly the wind steals ownership of your words. You whisper just to test it again, and this time the echo sounds like laughter, a small, distant thing that might not even be there. You tell yourself it's the wind, though you don't quite believe it. Further along the ridge, you find the mounds. Not natural rises, but shaped earth, smooth and deliberate. You pause, heart ticking faster, unsure if you've stumbled upon something sacred or forbidden or both. The ground feels watchful beneath your feet, as though it remembers everyone who's ever stepped here and is deciding how to catalog you. You crouch low, tracing the edges of one mound with your gloved hand. Beneath the thin layer of snow, the soil is dark and dense, holding its own warmth, like it refuses to let the cold take everything. The wind shifts, carrying the faint scent of pine smoke from the village far below, and for a moment, the present overlaps the past. You can almost see it fires burning here instead, not in the clearing, but right on this ridge. Shadows of people moving through the snow, carrying baskets, speaking languages swallowed by time. A small child chasing after a carved toy, the flicker of laughter that feels too specific to be. Imagination. You step back, dizzy with the weight of it all, and the woman who taught you fire appears at the ridge's edge, her breath visible in short, sharp clouds. She doesn't speak right away, just looks down at the mounds, then at you. Her expression is unreadable, somewhere between reverence and warning. She kneels beside one of the stone carvings, presses her palm to it gently, and says a word you've heard before used in songs and ceremonies. You repeat it clumsily. She corrects you softly, and for once you get close enough that she smiles. You ask what it means, though you already suspect she'll answer in gestures, not words. She taps her chest, then points to the ridge, the mounds, the horizon, and finally to the sky. It's not a translation, but it's enough. You understand. The people before her, before you, aren't gone. They're simply layered, folded like bark, waiting for the right silence to speak through. You both stay there for a while saying nothing, letting the wind move around you. When you finally start back down, you glance over your shoulder once more. The light hits the carvings just right, and they almost seem to shimmer. You tell yourself it's the ice-reflecting sun, but there's a shape to it, a rhythm that feels deliberate, like someone's still writing, still adding to the record. By the time you reach camp, your hands are stiff and your thoughts heavier than the fur around your shoulders. The storyteller listens as you describe what you saw, nodding slowly, eyes distant. When you finish, he only says, "They remember," then goes back to stirring the fire. That night, you lie awake, staring at the stars through the cracks in the shelter. You imagine them as holes poked through time, little glimpses of the same sky those people once stared at. You wonder what they thought about when they looked up, whether they felt as small as you do, or if they saw themselves as part of something too vast to name. The fire dies down to embers, and you close your eyes. The ridge lingers behind them, those carvings, those mounds, the whisper of laughter that may have just been wind. You drift into sleep thinking that maybe history isn't buried at all. Maybe it's awake, waiting for footsteps to stir it, patient as stone, eternal as echo. It starts with a cough, a small, forgettable sound in the cold morning air, one that doesn't seem worth noticing. But by the next day, there are more rough, hacking bursts that ripple through the camp like some dark melody the forest doesn't want to hear. The air feels heavier somehow, the smoke from the fires clinging lower, reluctant to rise. People speak in whispers, as if volume might anger whatever spirit has crawled into their lungs. You wake to find the woman who taught you fire sitting outside your shelter, her skin pale under the dawn light. She doesn't look at you, just stirs a pot of boiling water, the steam carrying the sharp scent of something green and bitter. When you step closer, she presses a damp cloth into your hand and says something you don't understand, but the tone is clear. Help. You do what you can. You fetch snow to melt, grind roots you can't name, pour water that feels like it's never warm enough. Every motion feels both urgent and useless. You try to remember everything you ever read about first aid, medicine, anything, but the only thing that comes to mind is a half-remembered article about hydration and hope. You keep moving anyway because standing still feels like surrender. The fever burns through the camp quietly, cruelly. People don't wail or panic. They endure, as if suffering is another form of weather. The old storyteller stops telling stories. The children no longer chase each other through the snow. Laughter, that thing that once felt indestructible, shrinks into silence. The days stretch long and gray, marked only by the sound of coughing and the hiss of water boiling over. Flame. You stay near the fires, helping to mix herbs, wiping sweat from foreheads, trying not to think about how thin everyone's faces are getting. The woman points out plants and roots as she crushes them, repeating their names slowly. You repeat them back, mangling the syllables until she sighs and smiles faintly. Humor, even now, finds a small place to live between you. At night, when exhaustion finally pins you down, you dream of smoke. It moves through your mind like fog, curling into shapes that almost resemble faces. When you wake, your throat aches from breathing the same air that carries sickness and ash. Outside, the snow has begun to fall again, soft and merciless. You watch it gather on the bodies of trees, on the roofs of shelters, on the edges of the world, erasing everything too slowly to be kind. A child dies quietly in the morning. No one screams, no one speaks. The body is wrapped in hides and carried beyond the clearing, footsteps muffled by snow. You follow from a distance, unsure whether you belong there or not. The forest watches, still and unblinking, as they lower the bundle into the earth. The woman hums a tune you've heard before, one that sounds like both lullaby and farewell. When you return to camp, the fire is nearly out. You feed it wood, watching the flames climb higher, desperate for something to answer the cold. The light flickers over faces, pale, tired, but still here. You try to make a joke, something about how you'd never make a good doctor, but your voice cracks halfway through, and no one laughs. Not because it isn't funny, but because laughter now feels too fragile to touch. The woman sits beside you and hands you a bowl of broth. It tastes like smoke and salt and the faint memory of herbs. You eat in silence, grateful for the warmth, the company, the fact that you're both still breathing. Later, when the wind rises and carries the smoke toward the sky, you look up and wonder if that's how grief travels. Here not in cries or words, but in the slow, steady exhale of fire meeting night. You breathe out too, hoping it counts for something. You wake to the kind of quiet that feels wrong. Not peaceful hollow, the kind that makes you sit up too fast and listen harder, hoping to hear the usual morning rhythm. Footsteps crunching snow, laughter from the fire, someone arguing with a pot. But there's nothing. Just the slow hiss of wind through the trees and the distant crack of ice shifting on the river. You step outside, and the world feels like it's holding its breath. Half the shelters are empty. The footprints left behind already blur into the snow, soft and vanishing. The woman who taught you fire stands near what remains of the central hearth, feeding it small sticks like she's trying to convince it to stay alive. Her face gives nothing away, but her eyes do. She points east, where the forest thickens and disappears into distance. You don't need words to know what it means. They've gone to follow the herds, to find what winter took. You nod, pretending you understand the practicality of it, but your chest feels like someone's taken half the sound out of it. You hadn't realized how much noise comforted you here, the hum of people moving, the low drone of stories being told, even the scolding clatter when you spilled something or tripped over a sleeping dog. Now every noise you make sounds amplified. When you walk, the crunch of your boots feels intrusive, like you're stepping on the quiet itself. The day stretches longer than usual. You gather wood, fix tools, help patch the hides over the shelters, but none of it feels real without the crowd of motion that used to fill every corner. The remaining few speak softly, as though trying not to disturb the emptiness left behind. When you laugh, once, at your own clumsy attempt to start the fire, the sound feels too bright for the air and dies quickly, embarrassed. By afternoon, the wind picks up. It whistles through the trees in a tone that sounds almost like language, and you find yourself answering out loud just to hear something human. You joke to no one. Tell the wind you'd trade your dignity for company, then immediately remember you might be in a century where the wind could take you up on that. When night comes, the cold deepens in a way that feels personal. The fire pops and settles, and you sit close enough to feel your skin tighten from the heat. The forest presses in around the camp, massive and alive, every shadow bending toward you. It's beautiful, in a way that makes your throat tighten, a beauty too vast to fit inside your small temporary life. You stare out at the dark and realize this is what distance really is, not space, but the awareness of it. The woman sits beside you, silent for a long time, then says something soft and slow. You catch one word: return. You nod, not sure if she means them or you. The fire flickers lower, the night leans closer, and you wrap yourself tighter in fur that still smells faintly of smoke and people who are no longer here. Before sleep takes you, you whisper something into the air. Not a prayer exactly, but a promise that when they come back, you'll have the fire waiting, no matter how long the distance tries to stretch. The flames answer with a crack, small and sure, and it's enough. For now, it's enough. The morning arrives without fanfare, gray, breathless, and cold enough to bite through memory. You wake to motion, people moving through the camp with quiet efficiency, bundling furs, tightening leather straps, folding what little can be carried. There's no panic, just purpose. Leaving, you realize, is something they've practiced their whole lives. You're still learning. The woman who taught you fire hands you a bundle of cord and points to a stack of hides. You understand enough to start tying them, your fingers stiff from the cold but obedient now. Your knots are still ugly, but functional, much like your survival so far. She checks your work, nods once, and says something that sounds like praise if you squint at it the right way. It's a small victory, but you'll take it. The storyteller moves between groups, checking packs, muttering a rhythm of instruction and blessing. Even the dogs seem to sense the change, restless and eager, pacing the edges of the clearing. You help where you can, rolling hides, tying bundles, feeding the last bits of fire to the wind. Each movement feels deliberate, as if you're packing away pieces of a life you've somehow borrowed. By the time the camp is bare, it doesn't even look like anyone ever lived here. The snow has already begun to smooth over footprints, erasing everything except the faint scent of smoke in the air. The woman gestures for you to follow, and just like that, you do. The world beyond the clearing is quiet but not empty. The sky hangs low, heavy with unfallen snow, and the trees stretch tall and skeletal around you. You've walked this land before, but it feels different now, less like a map, more like a conversation you're finally starting to understand. The rhythm of your steps matches the others, unplanned but perfect, a kind of collective heartbeat. You walk until your thoughts lose their edges, until the act of moving becomes its own language. Hours pass. The forest opens into a wide plain, blanketed in frost and dotted with distant herds, moving slow as shadows. Someone whistles, low and melodic, and the sound carries across the wind. It's not a song exactly, but it hums through you in a way that feels older than melody. You catch yourself joining in, under your breath, letting the sound tether you to the moment. At midday, The group stops near a half-frozen stream. Fires bloom quickly, efficient as breathing. You help gather wood, not because you're told to, but because it feels wrong not to. The woman hands you a flint and nods toward a pile of kindling. You kneel, strike the stone, and after a few failed attempts, sparks catch. The flame grows, small but insistent. You sit back, watching it, realizing that what once felt like magic has become something closer to memory. Food is passed around: dried meat, roots, something warm that tastes faintly of smoke and gratitude. The storyteller talks as they eat, his words painting shapes in the air, gestures filling the gaps where language fails you. You can't follow the story, but you know its rhythm. Loss, survival, the endless loop of leaving and arriving. You listen until you realize you've stopped translating in your head. You're just listening. Later, when the fires burn low and the light starts to fade, the group begins to move again. The land stretches ahead, unfamiliar and endless, but your fear of it has changed. It no longer feels like something waiting to swallow you. It feels like something inviting you to keep pace. You've learned that the land doesn't follow it, leads. You just have to listen for its rhythm and match it. As you walk, the wind picks up, carrying faint traces of pine and smoke, like the ghost of every fire you've ever built. You look back once, expecting to feel the pull of where you came from. But there's no ache, only motion. The footprints behind you already blur into the snow, but for the first time, that doesn't feel like loss. It feels like design. You keep walking until the light slips away, until all that's left is the sound of footsteps sinking with the earth. You don't speak. You don't need to. The world hums beneath you, steady and alive, and you move with it not as an outsider anymore, but as someone who's learned, finally, how to leave without vanishing. The first crack of thunder doesn't sound real. It rolls through the sky like something ancient, remembering its own name. You look up instinctively, squinting against the gray clouds swelling above the tree line, and for a second you forget what season it's supposed to be. The air smells wrong, sharp, wet, electric. The ground beneath you trembles with the weight of something returning. Then the rain starts, not the hesitant drizzle you've grown used to, but a downpour so sudden and full, it feels like the sky has been holding its breath all winter just to exhale on you personally. Within seconds, you're soaked through. Your fur hood darkens, water streaming down your neck, and every step makes a sound somewhere between a squish and a curse. You laugh despite yourself, because there's nothing else to do when nature commits this hard to the bit. The others don't run for cover right away. They just stand there, staring upward as the rain soaks into hides, hair, soil, everything. The woman who taught you fire lifts her arms to the sky and lets it pour down her face. Eyes closed, a faint smile breaking through months of quiet strain. You mimic her without thinking, tilting your head back, opening your mouth to taste it. It's pure, biting cold, and it hits your tongue like metal and newness. Around you, the world shifts color. Snow melts in uneven patches, bleeding into earth the color of smoke. The river, once silent under ice, begins to move again, cracking, groaning, rushing forward like it has opinions. The camp erupts into motion, people scrambling to secure shelters, laughter threading through the chaos. You try to help tie down a hide flap, but the wind keeps stealing the rope from your hands like it's mocking your competence. The woman laughs at you, not unkindly, and snatches it back, her fingers working faster than the storm itself. Thunder growls again, closer this time, loud enough to vibrate in your chest. You flinch, then catch yourself, pretending you were only stretching. The storyteller notices, smirks, and says something that makes the children laugh. You can't translate it, but you're pretty sure it's at your expense. You bow dramatically, soaking wet, and that makes them laugh harder. For the first time in what feels like forever, the sound doesn't feel heavy. It feels earned. The rain softens just enough to move without drowning. You walk down to the river, or what's left of it now that the thaw has turned it into an impatient flood. The water is alive, churning, wild, dangerous, beautiful. You crouch near the edge, watching branches, leaves, and memories of winter all being carried away. The current seems to hum a rhythm, one you've started to recognize in everything here. The pulse of the land reawakening. When lightning flashes, it splits the sky open for a heartbeat, illuminating everything, the people, the animals, the endless breathing world around you. For that single instant, everything looks connected, like threads in a giant web of light. You almost feel like you could see where it all leads if you just looked hard enough. Then the light fades, and all that's left is the sound of rain again, steady and cleansing. You walk back to camp drenched, grinning like an idiot, your boots squelching with every step. The fire crackles under a crude shelter, smoke curling low under the dripping hides. The woman sits beside it, feeding it bits of dry moss she somehow kept hidden from the weather. She gestures for you to sit, and you do, dripping puddles onto the ground. She says something you don't quite catch, and you answer with the universal language of raised eyebrows and vague hope that you didn't just agree to anything serious. She laughs again, shaking her head. The warmth from the fire creeps back into your hands. Steam rises from your clothes, mingling with the rain that still falls in thin silver strands. You look around at the camp at faces shining with water and relief, and realize that everything here is moving again. The world isn't waking up gently, it's exploding back into life, and somehow you're part of it. Outside, the thunder fades into distance, leaving behind a sky, torn open and raw but lighter. You step out from the fire's glow, tilt your head to the rain one more time, and let it hit your face until you're shivering and grinning all over again. It feels like forgiveness, like the land finally exhaled and decided you could stay a little longer. Somewhere far off, the raven calls twice, and this time you don't flinch. You just listen, because everything, the rain, the earth, your heartbeat, is answering back. It catches the corner of your eye, a flash too straight, too sharp to belong here. The forest doesn't shine like that. It glows, it breathes, it hums, but it doesn't glint. You stop walking and squint through the trees, expecting it to vanish, but it doesn't. It waits. The light flickers again, cold and metallic, the kind of reflection you haven't seen since home. You move closer, careful, pretending your footsteps aren't betraying your pulse. The air shifts around you, thicker, quieter, as if the forest itself is holding its breath. Through the tangle of birch and pine, you see it, something half buried in mud and early spring grass. It shouldn't be here. A torn scrap of cloth, colored too evenly to be natural, tangled around something that gleams dull silver in the weak light. Your first thought is impossible. Your second is worse. It's real. You kneel, brushing away dirt and leaves, and your fingers hit something cold, metal, smooth, worked, shaped by hands that don't belong to this century. It's small, like a buckle or a clasp, but heavy in your palm, far heavier than it has any right to be. You turn it over, and the shape is familiar enough to make your throat tighten. You've seen this before. Not this exact thing, but enough like it to know it's yours, or close to it. It's the language of the world you came from, the one filled with noise and numbers and lights that never went out, the world that felt like it would never end. Behind you, the forest stirs, a soft crack of a twig, a breath of air that doesn't belong to the wind. You turn and find the woman who taught you fire, standing at the edge of the clearing. She doesn't look surprised, only sad in that quiet, ancient way that makes you wonder if she's known this was coming all along. Her eyes flick to the object in your hand, then back to you. She says something softly, a question wrapped in warning. You don't answer. You can't. The thing in your hand feels heavier by the second, like it's deciding whether to pull you back or bury you here. You glance past her to the horizon, where the trees thin and the sky opens. For the first time, you see smoke, not the thin, curling kind that means cooking fires, but the thick, gray kind that means arrival. There are others coming, not from this world, not from hers, from yours. She steps closer, the earth soft under her feet, and holds out her hand, not to take the object, but to anchor you. You realize she doesn't fear what's coming. She fears what it will do to you. The wind shifts, carrying the faint sound of voices distant, sharp, unfamiliar. You can almost make out the rhythm of a language that tastes like home and hunger and everything you thought you missed. It's like hearing a ghost speak your name. You feel pulled in two directions at once by memory and by something older than it. The people who took you in are already gathering behind her, curious but cautious. They don't know yet what that smoke means, but you do. It's the sound of history sharpening its knives. You look down at the scrap in your hand one last time, then close your fingers around it until your skin creaks. It feels like holding the hinge between worlds. The woman's voice breaks through the wind again, calm, steady. You can't understand the words, but you don't need to. It's a question, maybe the only one that matters. You can go back to the world of iron and noise and endless, flashing light, to a life of comfort and forgetting. Or you can stay here, in the rhythm of rivers and fire, and people who taught you how to survive when you didn't deserve to. You realize you're not choosing between centuries. You're choosing between ways of being. The thunder from the storm hasn't fully left the sky. It rumbles low and distant as if waiting for your answer. You take a breath, taste rain and ash on your tongue, and feel the weight of both futures pressing against your ribs. You stand between them, one world approaching, one holding steady, and in the silence that follows, even the wind seems to listen. You stop keeping track of years because time here doesn't bother with counting. It moves like weather, sometimes slow, sometimes wild, sometimes both at once. The seasons fold into each other so seamlessly that you only notice change when it's already finished. The forest has a way of teaching you patience, not by instruction, but by immersion. You don't measure days anymore. You measure the distance between songs of birds you now recognize by name. Your clothes have changed. Your language has changed. Even your name, that strange, clumsy thing from another world, has softened into something that belongs better on the wind. The people who once found you stumbling through their clearing call you something else now, a word that means the one who listens. You didn't earn it by speaking, but by finally learning when not to. The woman who taught you fire grows older, her hair streaked silver like smoke at dawn. Her hands are slower now, but her eyes still hold that same knowing light, the one that always made you feel like you were arriving somewhere sacred without realizing it. Sometimes you still sit by the river together, watching the water move as if it knows the way even when you don't. She doesn't need to tell you that everything returns to the river eventually. You've seen enough cycles to understand. The forest itself feels different now, not smaller, not tamer, but familiar, in the way family becomes familiar, through countless unspoken agreements. You walk its paths without thinking. You know where the deer cross, where the roots twist to trip the inattentive, where the air grows heavy before rain. The trees don't seem to watch you anymore. They simply include you. You've become part of the background noise, another breathing thing in the endless hum of the living world. Sometimes, in the space between bird calls and wind, you think you hear something else, an echo from far away, metallic and thin, like the ghost of a time when the world buzzed differently. It fades before you can follow it. You tell yourself it's nothing, but a small part of you knows it's the sound of the other world moving on without you. It feels strange not to miss it. You've built things with your hands now, bows, baskets, fire pits lined with stone. Each mark of effort feels honest, earned in a way the past never offered. You remember once holding a phone, scrolling through lives you never touched. Now you hold coals in your palms to light a fire and think, absurdly, that this feels like progress. The children of the village have grown up with your stories, half true and half invented, about stars that move on command and glass boxes that glow. They laugh at you, thinking you're teasing, and maybe you are. It's easier that way. You don't tell them that once you lived in a place where no one knew the sky's smell or the taste of rain. You keep that secret, not because it hurts, but because it doesn't fit anymore. Seasons pass again. The forest thickens, then thins, then grows wild all over. The people move as they always have, following game and growth, never staying too long in one place. You move with them now, not out of survival, but belonging. You've learned that stillness isn't about staying, it's about being where the earth still listens. One night, sitting by the fire, you see a raven land on a nearby branch. It's older, or maybe just you are, but it looks at you with the same sharp intelligence as before. You nod at it like an old friend, and it tilts its head, unimpressed. Then, after a pause, it lets out a low, double call, 2 notes, familiar as breath, and disappears into the dark. You laugh, quietly, because the forest still has jokes. When the wind shifts, carrying the scent of pine and rain, and something older, you feel it settle deep in your chest, the steady rhythm of the world continuing without ceremony. You look around at the camp, the people, the firelight flickering against the trees, and you realize there's no line between before and after. There never was. Somewhere beyond these woods, history keeps moving. Empires rise, languages die, cities flicker into being and vanish again. But here, the forest stays. The songs change, but the hum remains. You sit a little closer to the fire, eyes half closed, and the sound folds around you like an embrace. The forest doesn't ask where you came from anymore. It already knows. And it keeps your secret the way it keeps everything else quietly, completely, forever.